This is Deborah Atkinson. Welcome to the Flipping 50 show, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how you can get the energy and vitality you want in the second and better half. And joining me today is my guest, Dr. Brad Gorski, who's a certified doctor of natural medicine and doctor of chiropractic. And I have to insert, as an Iowa girl, he received his doctorate from Palmer College in Davenport, Iowa. So he's got a passion to help people achieve turned on living. Turned on living exists to unlock the infinite possibilities of life because you have taken your health to a whole nother level. In 2009, Dr. Gorski started his office and it became one of the largest functional medicine clinics in the Southeast. After being an athlete his whole life, he focused on proper nutrition and exercise. Dr. Gorski started to become sick. After months of testing, both natural and traditional, no answers were available for his subtle symptoms of disease. At the age of 27, 4 different blood clots hit areas of his brain. Doctors were unable to explain how this could happen to someone who clinically and physically looked 100% healthy. After months with no answers and hundreds of tests at the cost of thousands of dollars coming back normal, the solution was now in his own hands. He had to unlock the answers to why he was in a hospital bed, unable to speak, hear, or move the right side of his body, and not knowing where the answers were. Dr. Gorski made a promise to himself. If he could discover the answers to his sickness, he would commit his life to ensuring people the most cutting-edge new model of healthcare. Dr. Gorski's personal suffering not only became a gift, but it also provides a testimonial of hope and authority to inspire others like you. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. That's quite a story.
Well, thank you. Yes, thanks for having me. And hopefully, we can give your listeners some great information today, and hopefully they can, use it to impact their health positively. That's why we're here, right?
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more, because, I think, we all kind of feel this, but I mean, you really sound like you were in the prime, not only the prime of life, but the prime of peak physical condition. What happened? I mean, give me some layers here.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the easiest ways I like to kind of explain it to people is that, I think from a standpoint, I like my lifestyle. Obviously, nutrition was in order. I was an athlete, so I was, physically, taking care of myself. But I think, the reality is, I say this as today is disease is changing. The fact that I could get sick at 27 after, again, pretty much, looking, pretty physically, like what you would assume was a model of health would be, and getting extremely sick. What I would suggest is that I think what we're seeing today is, there's the analogy that you can only put so much crap in your bucket. And we'll talk more about this. And once you actually have enough stressors or things that come in your way, it just takes a small thing to push you over the edge to create, issues and symptoms. And I think that's exactly what happened to myself. It wasn't really what I did that was causing my sickness. I think that probably kept me alive. But the key is moving in a house that had mold was literally what pushed me over the edge that kind of started my sickness.
Wow. I love that statement. I've never heard that put so simply and easy to understand. You can only put so much crap in your bucket. Right? I think we're all clear on that. I don't care if you're from Iowa, Boulder, or South Carolina. We got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So mold, we're talking, that's a form of toxins that we're hearing a little bit more about, but you're in South Carolina. So here from Boulder, I would think, I'm not going to have a problem with that because, I don't live in that kind of climate, or, that's not an issue here. I think we hear more about that from people in Texas, and that's not an issue. Or I have a new house. That can't be a problem. Am I living under a rock?
No, I mean, I think you could be right. I think, but you also could be wrong. I think that, one of the things, and I think let's go back to that analogy of the bucket. I always say this is that there are about 20, between 20 and 30%, depending on the research you read, that actually have a genetic susceptibility to mold. Now, what's unique about this is actually the gene that actually can be triggered, and they actually know specifically can also trigger hypothyroid autoimmune issues or Hashimoto's. So mold actually has an affinity to actually trigger certain genes and can actually literally turn that disease on. But again, remember, not the mold doesn't make everybody sick. And it goes back to, because you also have to look at, again, what's the other crap in the bucket. And that's where I think too, just the analogy of, that we're always exposed to kind of stuff in our life. And if we don't do a good job of maintaining the stuff in the bucket and getting out of our body, it just takes the littlest thing over the edge to push us into, a position of symptoms.
Wow. Okay. Got it. 20 to 30% of us have a genetic predisposition for it.
Absolutely. And kind of while we're, talking about this too, it was interesting, I went through my story and, we finally over enough time realized like, hey, there's got to be something in this house making me sick. And it was interesting. I mean, at this point, I was a practicing, doctor in practice, and I actually had helped people get out of their moldy home, get well. But it was almost like, I never really thought that obviously the house was quite making me as sick as I was, because, I would start having symptoms for a couple weeks, like extreme fatigue, brain fog, low energy. My hands were kind of swelling up. And then I would really just like zone in nutritionally. Like I would go 100% raw with my diet, add in different supplements, and I would kind of bounce back for a couple weeks, and then I was getting sick again. And I think that, the key, I think, with me saying that, I think too, is that, that was just, it was such of a stress on my body. And again, I wasn't really aware of it. And I think, again, that bucket began to fill up, and then it kind of hit a tipping point where it's like, hey, at that point, the only way I was going to get myself well is I had to move out of that home.
That was my next question. I was wondering if you were able to fix it when you were there or just had to get out completely. So I won't even ask if you disclose it to the new buyers. Okay, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, no, it's, my wife and I actually we were running the home. So, we moved in this new place, and, what's unique about this is that once we moved in and I started going through these symptoms, and I was very health conscious. I was like, hey, there's something going on. We moved out of the house for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden a lot of my symptoms started to resolve. So here are my wife and I, I'm 27, and we're like, hey, Mom, Dad, we're moving back in for a couple weeks. So we move in with our parents for a couple weeks, again, just to see if it really made a difference. And it was amazing. Yeah, within 2 weeks, I started feeling a ton better. And then actually that weekend we made the decision like, hey, let's move out of the house. Let's move on. I flew to my best friend's wedding that weekend in Michigan. Gave my best man speech. The next morning is when I had my stroke. So it was really unique, is as we were making the decision to move out, we knew it was like, okay, it's been enough time. I have to move out of the house. It's now time to change. And once we decided to do that, man, it was right then, that weekend actually, when we were away, that I actually had my stroke.
Wow. Because it's still in your system, even though you were away from it.
Yeah, and that's what it begins to really do is, it really begins to kind of, again, and one thing the mold does, it kind of suffocates your blood, and again, once it starts kind of weakening down your sinuses, which is most of your main immunity, it kind of weakens the lungs, and then it goes to your gut. So, it's really unique how the mold works. And, we start talking about hormones at a certain age. What people always forget is that, most of our hormones are actually controlled by our hypothalamus or our pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is really the main hormone control center of the entire body. So, when you start talking about, mold and toxins, how they can affect you, like, yes, they can affect, again, just even low energy and fatigue, but really the area we know they concentrate on is up at that hypothalamus pituitary gland. And that's why they cause such hormone issues or disruption.
Wow. Okay. So, and I just want to go back to this because, so you were living in this house with your wife, you got sick, but she didn't.
Yeah. It was interesting. That's what we initially thought. We move out of the house, we realized that what the mold had done is triggered an autoimmune issue with my body. I had hypothyroid autoimmunity. So, once we kind of were able to put our finger on the fact that it was hypothyroid, what's unique is the clotting factor that I have. Actually, about 40% of people who have a thyroid issue have the same autoimmune factor in their blood that caused my stroke. A lot of times doctors and physicians don't even look at that because it's nothing they actually use or address. One thing I always say is with a lot of clients we work with, it's like, that's one thing we want to know for sure. So just we make sure that we're aware of, what's going on in their body. But yeah, we get myself well. What was unique is my wife had no symptoms. But a couple of years down the road, my wife and I started the process of trying to have kids. And, over, about a year of trying and really no kind of success. And finally we said, okay, well, let's actually look at some labs and let's see if there's any underlying cause of what's going on. We ran some numbers on my wife, and what was unique about it is, again, she has no symptoms besides infertility, but her autoimmune thyroid numbers were the highest I've seen of any patient. So, again, not a whole lot of symptoms, but definitely dysfunction building in her body. And I don't think if we would have actually really, we're been trying to have a child, we may not even known. So that's how some of they develop very slowly. Sometimes why we're unaware.
Interesting. Really interesting. Okay. So let's talk about, what was your path to well?
Yeah, there were a lot of things. I think one of the first things we did is the first thing was obviously, we had to get some better testing to figure out why this happened. I was in one of the best stroke hospitals in the state of Michigan, and they said, hey, we have no answer, no solution for you. Good luck. Take a medication and hopefully it doesn't happen again. That's literally what I was given to, at the age of 27. So, my mind is already oriented that, hey, there's always a reason, there's always a cause. We just have to find it out. So we ruled out genetic testing. It wasn't genetic, and we ran some blood tests, and really we went to we came back. Once we, kind of came back to Charleston after, getting out of the hospital, we basically just ran about every test we could get our hands on to figure out, hey, there's got to be something going on. And that's when we realized it was autoimmune driven. So, we started going through some protocols. Obviously, we never stepped foot back in that place. We moved immediately. We started doing some things to help my brain heal from the stroke. So we started using hyperbaric treatments. And then really the next year was really where I kind of went on my own journey, not only to, I think, get myself back and healthy, but also too, again, I think my goal is to really reverse my condition. There's a lot of things we went through. I learned a lot about, cellular inflammation. We learned a lot about gut function, because obviously, if you have an autoimmune driven condition, you can't really reverse it or relieve it if you're not really looking at the gut. The gut is such a huge thing for immunity. My path took me down a lot of things about detoxing mold, detoxing heavy metals, getting my gut back and fixed, and getting rid of all my food allergies that I had. So those were a lot of the initial processes, and obviously we could jump down each of those paths depending on how far we want to go.
Got it. Okay. So one thing I want to do for my listeners, and we bring this up and we say detox, and they're reading it, they're hearing it, and yet I think there's still a little bit of a cloud about, what is that? What is detox? Can you help us define it, Brad?
Yeah, for sure. I always like to think of detox as three different things. Okay, so we have our colon, which is like our main excretory organ of our body, right? So we have our colon, we have our liver, and then in between the colon and the liver, I just want you to think we have a river, which we call our matrix, and then we have our cells. So I think where most people get confused on with detox is what they do is they do, some kind of colon cleanse, or they, they do some kind of herbal supplements for a month, and they kind of feel like they're actually detoxing. But really detox, what it really is about, and what it gets down to is at the end of the day, it really gets down to actually, again, understanding at the cellular level what actually is because your cells actually make a product called glutathione. It's actually your body's number one antioxidant to detox. So really true detox comes down to really, again, getting your cells, really their glutathione levels back optimized, so your body and your cells can kind of detox on their own and not really do it artificially, if that kind of makes sense. I think that's a big thing people miss about detox, is that, it's really a cellular process. And before you can detox a cell, you got to have a clear colon, you got to have a clear liver. And then we also have to detox what we call the matrix, for really people to really detox the right way.
Got it. Okay. So talk to me about, and maybe explain the matrix before I ask this next question. Explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, so just think of the matrix as kind of like the river of the body. And basically, your cells and your tissues are dump kind of all the crap or the junk. We'll kind of keep it simple, right?
Yeah, right.
We'll throw all the crap and the junk into the matrix, which is the river, and then the river is going to flow, again, to our liver or to our colon. So the liver basically processes the crap. It gets processed through your bile. Bile gets dumped in your stomach, and you eliminate it through number 2. Or the other option is once it gets into that river, it can get thrown to your kidneys if it's a water-soluble toxin, and then it actually gets excreted through your kidneys. So that matrix is basically the intermediate part that either dumps stuff into the kidneys or the liver or the colon. So, one of the easiest way to actually kind of detox your matrix, which is actually really easy for people to understand, is number 1 is getting control of stress. So stress binds up your matrix. Alkalizing your body cleans up your matrix. Oxygenating, exercising, things like rebounding, infrared sauna, those things kind of open up the matrix, so your body can basically dump things from your cells, your tissues, into those detox pathways or organs to really get that crap fully out of the body.
Love it. Okay. So is it fair to say that a large percent of us can naturally detox by having these healthy habits? Do we need more help?
Yeah, I think there are. Where I would go back to is I think it does kind of go back to that bucket theory. We all have buckets and we have different size of buckets depending on our genetics, and we've all been kind of exposed to kind of different quote unquote crap. So, there is a process, yeah, where we have to have our body kind of as strong as possible to handle the things we're dealing with. So, and maybe we can talk a little bit about, some of the things we definitely need to be avoiding. Because when we talk about today thyroid, there's some specifics I really like to give out. We talk about specific, toxins for your thyroid. But yeah, we have to do a better job of really kind of, I think, looking at our exposures and where we're giving them. The problem is today is, we're getting so many more exposures in so many other places, from our homes, to the food, to our air we breathe. So it's becoming harder to avoid toxins. So I think, kind of keeping up with a healthy lifestyle and really keeping on the cutting edge of what's going on, I think is essential today. I really think that what used to get people well in the, maybe in the 80s and the 90s, it really doesn't work today because we really live in such a different world.
Right. And let me clarify something. So when you mentioned stress, alkalize our body, oxygenate, trouble with that word, but mostly my tongue. Let's hit stress, just to define that. So are you talking the whole allostatic load? You're talking emotional and the exposure to our electronics and everything?
Yeah, let's throw all that in the bucket, which we call the crap bucket. So really, yeah, they all are. They're all equal. Whether it's nutritional toxin, EMF, frequency from a computer, or being exposed, to some kind of device like putting your iPhone to your head. Yeah, those are all kind of drops in the bucket. And I guess what I would say on that is, again, I remember our bodies are designed to kind of handle some of those stresses, but the key I always kind of, when we talk about hormones, and really the key is can your body adapt to the stress it's under? And that's really where the dysfunction happens. So, one of my first kind of, take home points, I think people can probably listening today say, if they're kind of feeling a little overwhelmed, like, oh gosh, where do I start? Well, first of all, your B vitamins are what are literally what help you buffer stress. So when you're depleted in B vitamins, literally it becomes impossible to handle the stress you're under. So, I do think there is a pathway and a roadmap that people can use, to kind of help them, buffer the stress they're under. And one of the first things that I always suggest is vitamin D optimization, which is huge and crucial. And then also really B vitamin supplementation and really optimization, just making sure you're not deficient. Those are the first two things you can do to help make sure your body is basically able to respond to the stress you're under.
Love that. Okay. Thanks for simplifying and clarifying, because I think, we are still and maybe it's with my audience, so all of you listeners can identify with this. I said this just the other day to somebody. We grew up, we have the sex talk with our parents, but we never had the stress talk. Nobody sat us down and said, hey, this is going to happen to you, and here's how you deal with it. Here's what you do or you don't do. And, I think maybe now we're getting better at handing the baton off to our children in a better way. And we're aware there's a problem, but we still don't have a great toolbox, both for, dealing with those emotional stressors, for, being able to say no to certain things so we can say yes to ourselves and have a little downtime. That all plays into, if you're exposed to, toxins in your shampoos and your cleaning fluids, and you're exposed to chemicals at work, all of that, we can't handle it as well. And I think that we still have to emphasize how important it is to take stress seriously.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think, that's when we kind of, I think one of the key points that most people miss, and, if you could think of this visually, if you take most of your hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, even your stress will throw in that bucket, your progesterone. So all these hormones we have, whether we all look at them good or bad, well, if you actually look at the whole pyramid of how these things, there's three things that have to be in a line above all those hormones. So basically, you need these three things in order to make all the hormones of your body. And the first thing is it needs vitamin D. You also need proper B vitamins. And then the third thing is you need proper cholesterol. Those three things will actually determine and actually make a hormone called progesterone, which is the mother hormone of the human body. So, those three things really, the more kind of optimized those are, really, the better your hormones do and the more kind of stress and crap you're able to handle, really to kind of keep your body strong.
Love that. So simple, really simple. Let me ask you this. So a little side question, and then let's come back to what to avoid for thyroid, because I know that's a hot topic for a lot of listeners, and we want to address that in terms of, reaching sufficiency with micronutrients. What are your thoughts? Do we need, most of us, to supplement? Are we kind of living in a myth thinking we can eat all the micronutrients we need?
Yeah, I think that, there are some people I have worked with who definitely are optimized, but it is tough. We have, bad digestive systems today. So it's really hard to get all our nutrients from our food. And as much as I would love to say, hey, you don't need supplements to survive, I think today, more and more, we need good food-based supplements. So let's actually maybe clarify that too. I think we should be promoting, supplements that really are very as close to foods we can get. Yeah, but I think today, we do need supplementation to really kind of optimize our hormones. And, I would kind of say on that note too, I think one of the things we talk about vitamin D, and people don't realize this, is that, vitamin D is actually really more of a hormone. I mean, actually 1 in every 25 genes of the human body have to have vitamin D to work properly. So, with vitamin D really being more of a hormone, we kind of don't look at it as kind of that, we just think of it more as a vitamin. But vitamin D, if you look at the range, it's, on a normal lab test can be 30 to 100. And what we know is that if your level is between 60 to 85, you basically reduce your chance of almost every cancer by almost 80%. So there's kind of a difference too between, I would say, a normal quote unquote level and what I would call an optimal level, or a level for high performance. And I think that's also the other key, is that a lot of times our metrics that, maybe physicians are looking at, or other practitioners are, they're kind of giving you the normal, and they're not saying, hey, well, Deborah, you're unique. You have a unique body. You have different needs than maybe a male at 30 does, or even someone who's maybe 70. And I think sometimes we have to take that into fact too.
Such a great point. So normal level, almost could be, okay, here's the average, right? Nobody wants to be average, right?
I don't.
And we have to look back and say, RDIs were designed at a point when it was all about reducing disease, preventing disease. And, we're living a whole different lifestyle now. Plus, most of us want to thrive. We don't just want to survive.
Absolutely. And I think that's too, I think what's unique is, I think really that, in my mind, I really think that the future of healthcare is, and I think we all say this, we all know that, food is medicine, and I believe that, don't get me wrong. But I think also too, it comes down to the right food is also medicine. And I think too, I think that the future of healthcare, I don't believe is in really prevention. I believe it's actually in performance, because I think that when people start looking at their body at a level of performance, I think that, it becomes a different process of using different analytics. And I use that term with a lot of my clients, is we call them body analytics. It's like a business, you never run a business without looking at their analytics. And I think it's the same kind of theory with the body. We want to get as many analytics as we can to really get, kind of optimize performance, and not be so much concerned about, just treating a condition, or maybe giving you an herb that lowers your blood sugar that's not really correcting the cause of why it's off in the first place.
Perfect. Very clear. All right, now back to thyroid. So, roundabout way, what are those things that are so important to you? So I heard a lot of emphasis on this, and some things that you want to give out. What do we avoid?
Yeah, one of my first things I like to, and maybe this would be a good, maybe education, for your listeners, but there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of information on the thyroid too. So many times over the last, 5 years, that's really been a main focus of, my current practice. And so, when we think about thyroid, I guess the first thing I want to kind of identify for people, just so they understand this, your thyroid basically has kind of two different hormones. You have your T4, which is kind of like your inactive hormone, which basically means no matter how much of you have of that, it still has to be converted to what's called T3 to work right. So that's kind of the conundrum here, is that we need T4, but then it has to be converted to T3. Well, when we talk about, heavy metals like mercury, one of the top things that mercury does is mercury inactivates the conversion of T4 to T3. So That's one of the big toxins I like to kind of talk a lot about as we start talking about different toxins. Is that's a very specific one. The other thing that can actually affect the conversion of T4 to T3, which basically means if you have a ton of T4, I always use this analogy. If someone has normal blood work and they still feel really bad, that's probably what that is. They have their hormones look normal, but their hormones aren't getting in their cells or their tissues. So when we talk about the T4 to T3, heavy metals like mercury, and then also having high blood sugar or consuming a lot of grains is actually one of the top things that actually affects the conversion of T4 to T3.
Really? Okay. So is this true for everybody? So we're not necessarily talking about someone who has Hashimoto's, but do grains contribute to the development?
Yeah, watch this. Is what people don't realize is once you have a thyroid condition, you have an 80% chance of developing diabetes, because literally these two conditions work the exact same way. So, and that's what people forget is that, there's research that even suggests out there today is that as many as 90% of people have a suboptimal thyroid. I mean, if you think about that number, I mean, that's mind blowing, because, really what is your thyroid? That's really your metabolism organ of your body. So, and, so, I mean, I think too, we talk about, the grains, I mean, they definitely play a big role. And I think also too, that's where, again, the thyroid is not only a concern, but, the diabetes is what most people don't realize is once they have a thyroid issue, they're probably going to develop diabetes if they don't really get to the root cause.
Definitely. That's news. Yeah, I know that's going to surprise a lot of people. Okay. So T4 is inactive, has to convert to T3 to really do us any good. That number can look great, but we can still feel like crap and, get that you're normal. So then what? Yeah.
One of the top things we can talk about, even maybe giving a little bit of a solution here, is for that T4 to convert to T3. The most important nutrient, I don't know if maybe you know what it is. Deborah, you know what it is? The most important nutrient to convert T4 to T3?
I want to get it now. No.
It's okay. It's selenium.
Oh, I did know that one. Okay.
Yeah. So selenium is actually, actually helps a lot. So one of the first things is a lot of times people who have, maybe they think their thyroid's off, or again, this is so common, most of the clients I work with, again, they've had normal blood work for years, but they just don't feel well. So they can't lose weight. They don't have energy. They have other hormone problems going on, maybe even high cholesterol, but they're like, my blood work's normal. And then a year or two hits and they're finally like, oh my gosh, I have my diagnosis. But then the problem is they go ahead and they sometimes take the medication. They still don't feel better. So the key is that the selenium is actually what helps convert T4 to T3. That's a big one. And another thing I always love to share with people, because I think it's very eye opening. In the 1970s, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a medication that they use to suppress someone's thyroid if it's hyper or too fast. And before this medication was actually released in the 1970s, they used to give somebody a toxin that is very common. I mean, people could, in their home, get exposed to this daily. And I'm not sure if you've heard of it or know what it is. Do you know what I'm hinting at here?
No.
It is actually fluoride.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Fluoride in water, fluoride in toothpaste. Actually, before the 1970s, actually used to be given to treatment for hyperthyroid. So if your thyroid was really fast and again, so your hair is falling out, a lot of times these people have like rapid heart rate. They're literally like, skin and bones because their metabolism is so fast. Well, yeah, they used to treat these people with high doses of fluoride. But if we take that approach and look at people who are having trouble with their energy, or maybe their thyroid isn't optimized, these halogens like chloride and fluoride, what they really do is they kind of inactivate iodine, which your thyroid needs for normal function. So that's another huge one that we have to kind of look at.
Got it. Great. What are your thoughts on iodine supplementation?
Yeah, I love it. The only key is that the number one thing about thyroid is, as many as 80% of all thyroid conditions are really autoimmune driven, which means that you truly don't even really have a thyroid issue. It's more of an autoimmune response. So the first thing is you kind of have to decipher if your body's autoimmune. If your body is autoimmune and you wind up supplementing with iodine, it could actually increase or exacerbate your symptoms. So you have to be careful with that. And that's like why I think too, like again, I from a lot of my clients is once we kind of calm down their immune response, then yes, we like to give them iodine. But in the beginning, if you're autoimmune, it can definitely actually speed up the symptoms and actually kind of make you worse.
Wow. Okay. So what's the difference between free when we're talking about thyroid hormones? So T4, T3, the free versions.
Yeah, when we talk about the other thing I like to kind of throw in that equation to really understand is, we kind of mentioned like, hey, when we look at a normal thyroid panel, yes, you want the T3, you want the T4, you're going to have your TSH, but really, you can also too, which is important, is you definitely need to get those antibody numbers. That always needs to be on the test. The other thing is, we talked about selenium, is you can actually run a blood test that's called serum selenium, and kind of get an idea of where your selenium levels are at. So, if you're maybe listening in, you definitely want that above 300. I usually like probably above 320 on a lab. But then the other thing is, when we talk about the kind of the free T3, we also have to understand what kind of competes with free T3, and that's actually something called reverse T3. So think of this as in states of stress, your body doesn't even use normal thyroid hormone or T3. So, if your body's under a lot of stress, or your body's in this state of what we call reverse T3, the problem is none of your T3 that's available will ever work. So yes, free T3 is important, but you want to look at that kind of in perspective compared to that reverse T3.
Got it. Okay. So a lot of variables here. All right. Let's go into like mercury, heavy metals. How do we know? Yeah,
I would say this. The first thing I guess you could always do is you could go to your mirror and open up your mouth and see if you have actually metal fillings in your mouth. That's always an easy way to check.
Okay.
But I think the first thing is I think to kind of keep it feasible for people, I think the first thing is just look at reducing your exposures. I think when we start looking at, our environment, again, dental fillings have a ton of amalgam filling in them. And in fact, in most countries, in the world, metal fillings in people's mouths are not legal. We're one of the only countries in the world who allows that. So, definitely, be smart with your oral care. If you have to get a filling, again, try to use a non-amalgam type. Vaccinations like the flu vaccine, they have, a mercury, in those. So, ask questions like that. Your, things like, tuna and swordfish, a lot of times your big animals contain a lot of mercury. So, you got your amalgams, your vaccinations, and your fish are actually where most people get their heavy metals, pretty much in that order. Order would be, number one, the amalgam fillings, number two, vaccination, the number three is actually mercury in seafood is where we get most of our metals from.
Okay. So how am I going to feel if I've got heavy metal issues?
Yeah, if I were to describe the symptoms, and it's pretty interesting, I do this when I run seminars. If I were to show you side by side the symptoms of hypothyroid and show you side by side the symptoms of mercury poisoning, these symptoms look almost identical.
Wow.
You would not even believe them. So I think, sometimes too, I think a lot of times, what I always kind of use as an analogy, I think, before people love to jump to the detox. And I think the first thing with detox you need to understand is, first of all, avoid your exposures. Number two, the first thing you need to do is you need to kind of put the basics in place first before you can even consider detoxing. And what are the basics? Just some of the things we've talked about today. Obviously, reduce your exposures. Number one, make sure you've optimized your vitamin D. Make sure your B vitamins are kind of optimized, and make sure you don't have any deficiencies like in selenium. So until those things are kind of in place, jumping to a form of detox is almost, again, you're kind of, putting the car before the cart before the horse. You got to kind of put those basics in place first before we kind of run down those more advanced protocols.
That makes sense. So just jumping in without covering your bases is one of the biggest mistakes we're making with detox. What is the best protocol for detox? I mean, change the diet, remove things, add things, or are there additional supplementations, certain protocols that you recommend?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one of the products we use, and I always say, before I work with any of my clients, any kind of detox, we're usually spending 2 to 3 months really kind of optimizing nutrition. I think that is important. There are a couple of genes that play a role in and really kind of making sure that your B vitamins are being utilized, and also too that your body can process cholesterol the right way. Because remember, we were talking about that whole connection, right? Vitamin D, B vitamins, and cholesterol really need to be optimized before any of our hormones work right. So, once those kind of basics are in place, as we talk about the basics of detox, one of the products that we like to use, which is very safe and it's very effective, but obviously you want a physician to use it. It's a product that I don't know if you've ever heard of or you're familiar with zeolite, but zeolite is a rock that comes from volcanoes. volcanoes. And actually what they've done is actually there's a doctor over at Cleveland Clinic who actually has created a product that what he did is he took this form of zeolite, which is basically, I don't know if you know this, but when people go to their gas tank and they put their gas in, there's actually a tab of zeolite that actually sits at the gas tank that actually pulls lead out of the gas. So you have unleaded gas. Now, this zeolite, which is a rock, this doctor over at Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Nicholas, he actually took this and turned it into liquid. So there's some really easy ways today to really kind of pull metals out of your body that are very safe, very effective, and it kind of avoids some of the chelation, some of the heavier, more advanced types of detox that can be a lot tougher on the body.
So how long is to detox from heavy metals? How long is that? Or does it vary based on the person and based on the severity?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the person. And I would say this, one of the things I always, when I tell people my story, what's interesting is at 3 months of age, I was vaccinated. And actually from that point forward, I quit breathing and I lived on breathing machines for the next 3 years of my life. And, so I always tell people that story that, for me, that mercury was probably a trigger or a big drop in the bucket. So that was a big thing that probably, was in my bucket. So that when I got exposed to the mold, there wasn't any room in the bucket, then I began to become sick. So, the first thing I would say when we talk about, like the heavy metals, the first thing is it needs to be a slow process, because to think that if I had metals from the age of, 3 months, to think that we're going to do a detox and pull them out of your body in a month or two doesn't really make sense. So, one of the kind of the analogies I always use is it usually takes 2 to 3 months to kind of slowly pull things out of your body. And you have to develop what's called a gradient, where things are basically slowly coming out of your body instead of kind of coming in. But yeah, then once you've kind of done the body for a couple months, then you want to go up to what we call a brain phase for a couple months. And once you spend about 6 to 9 months of just slowly detoxing, and that's how long it can take for most people, you've done a really good job, but you kind of have to kind of continually slowly do it. And that's how I always kind of approach detox, is that it's not something that can be done within a month or two. It's a slow process. It's steady, because we also have to get to the deep tissue where most of this junk kind of lays.
Mm-hmm. Do you see people, I think people imagine, detox, that they might just feel really bad when some of the toxins actually start coming out. Is that a part of the process?
Yeah, it can be. I would say yes and no. One of the protocols that we use, this product I'm kind of describing to you, which actually is called Cyto Detox, is actually the product. And there are doctors across the country who are trained in how to use this. But yeah, the Cyto Detox, which actually was designed for that, and I've been using it for, almost 3 years now. And I can knock on wood, and I say this very loosely, because as soon as I say this, right, someone's going to react. But I've not had one person in 3 years of taking it really have a negative reaction to it. So I think that, the way that it works, it's very safe. And when you do it very slow, if you do it the right way, that you're not always going to have detox symptoms. And I think that there's some cool technologies out there today that kind of help make sure and ensure that process.
Great. And one thing, this will be a little bit random because I know we've talked about it a little earlier, but you mentioned in terms of, we want to do 3 things. We want to oxygenate, and you mentioned infrared sauna. Are you a big believer?
Yeah, I do. And I think like any therapy, I don't think, are they perfect? No. I think you got to get a good one. And I think with every great sauna, are they a perfect, tool? No, but I think they can definitely help in the process. Myself, I have a sunlight and sauna, and I think it's a great sauna, but I know there are other companies out there that make really good products too. And I think too, as a general rule of thumb, one of the things I like about a sauna is it's very easy, because what it also does is raising core body temperature. So what it's basically doing is it's almost, again, giving your body a fever, which actually right away supports your immunity. And again, also too, when you raise your core body temp like that, it actually supports metabolism. So it really kind of helps support the body and kind of prepare the body for detox. And that's like why I like using things like a sauna, to really kind of help jumpstart the process with people.
Love that. Great. Brad, where is the best place for people who, wonder or love the way you're describing detox, wonder about mercury or heavy metals? Where can they get more, Brad, more information?
Yeah, probably the best is my website, which is drbradgorski.com. So that's DR and then Brad, B-R-A-D, Gorski, Gorski.com. And you'll see as we are putting up information on that website very rapidly. We're in the process of expanding, and so that's going to be a great resource for people to go. And also on there too, there's a way to even get some of the testing I've talked about today. I mean, I think one of the big things I love to do with a lot of my clients is I'm all about education. I think that, as we become more educated, we can all make better decisions. So, I'm hoping too that the information we're giving you today, Deborah, will really help your listeners.
I can't believe that it won't. It was great, very insightful, and you kind of broke things down in a way we got the crap in the bucket, we need to get the crap out of the bucket.
There you go.
So, love that. And thanks, listeners. If there's a question that you wish I would have asked, then please leave that below the show link at flipping50.com, all spelled out. Or know this, if you're walking right now, and I hope you are, or you're weight training, the link for drbradgorski.com will be in the show notes, so you can come right back here and get it and ask him a question directly. I love hearing from you, and I'm sure he will as well. And if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share this with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes at flipping50.com/podcast, where you'll find all the juicy free downloads, resources that we mentioned on the show, some details and notes in case you've forgotten some of the juicy notes that Dr. Gorski gave us. Let's start flipping 50 today.